Welcome back to Hardball. The right wing is all for identification when it's used to suppress the voters of people who might vote Democratic. But when it comes to making enormous anonymous contributions to elect right-wing candidates, identification is the last thing they want. The Washington Post's Harold Meyerson brilliantly points to this whole question here about the hypocrisy in his latest column. It begins, quote, "Better bring some identification, and not just any identification, official though it may be, if you plan to vote in Republican-controlled states. However, if you contribute tens of millions of dollars to sway an election on the Republicans' behalf, the party will fight to keep your identity a dead secret." Well, take a look at this tax return from Karl Rove's secret money group, Crossroads GPS. See that mammoth $18 million contribution? Who's it from? Person. That's it. Person. And that's all the identification he gets, a box-checked person. Meanwhile, if you want to vote in the state of Texas, something that is your right, you better be able to identify yourself by producing driver's licenses, passports, military ID, even a concealed gun permit, but not a student ID, of course. And 1 in 10 registered voters in that state lack acceptable ID, according to the Advancement Project. Well, Judith Brown Dianis is co-director of the Advancement Project, and Steve McMahon is a smart Democratic strategist. I want to start with the overall notion here. Just to make it simple, Steve, for everybody watching, why would the Republicans want to make it hard to vote but easy to give money secretly?
Well, if you make it hard to vote for African Americans and Hispanics, then, of course, Democrats get fewer votes and Republicans might be able to win more elections. And if you make it easy to hide the money, which the Republicans also like to do, then you have wealthy Republican businessmen like the Koch brothers and others who can contribute $18 million to slander a Democrat, and no one ever knows who did it.
Why do those characters, the Koch brothers, why do they want to remain secret like the Lone Rangers? Why they don't think most people, when they give money to hospitals, for example, they want their name on the door. Why do they want to keep it secret?
Well, in polite company, you know, it's not considered appropriate to engage in this kind of skullduggery and character assassination. So I presume it has more to do with the cocktail circuit than it has to do with anything else. Normally, you're right, the ego generally wants to be recognized with a lot of these folks, but in this case, they want to hide, and they're doing a pretty good job hiding under rocks and hiding behind anonymous campaign filing reports.
Judith, again, let's go back to a topic you and I have talked before. I don't think everybody who's a Republican is a racist, but I do think they think that blacks will tend to vote Democrat, and the fewer blacks that vote, the better off their chance of winning an election. It's just sheer, naked political advantage they achieve by denying people their constitutional rights.
That's right. That's right, Chris. I mean, these laws were surgically crafted in ways to hit African Americans, Latino voters, and young voters. You know, we have Advancement Project has lawsuits in Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, and in North Carolina, where we know that the effect of these voter ID laws and the other voter suppression tools really are to hit the folks that they don't want to vote, right? And so, you know, in places like Texas, this is like called the Texas two-step, right? You have first, let's buy an election and make sure that we can get the right people in the seat, and then let's make sure that we silence the people that we don't want to vote so that we get the right outcomes in terms of elections. And they don't want to put their names out there because they know that it's undemocratic and it's un-American.
So some guy like Ted Cruz would look at this as a survival kit. Not only does he deny any chance of him getting defeated, he denies any chance of somebody getting in there that might support health care, thereby denying health care to over 1 million people, including kids. He gets to be a senator and well-fed, and he gets health care, but he makes sure 1 million people in Texas don't. I mean, that's just the fact. You don't have to argue this politically. Those are the facts. He gets it. They don't. They don't get the vote. They don't get health care. He gets the voting power in the Senate, and he gets health care, and he wins as long as you can suppress the vote.
And they know, they've done their calculations. They know that that America is changing. The changing demographics and the rising electorate leaves them with having to sway women and people of color. And they're not ready to do that. They're not ready to make sure that their policies meet the needs of all Americans. And we are diversifying, but they're not ready to make that move. So instead, they would prefer to silence voters.
Go ahead, Steve.
There's one other thing that's going on here, of course, and that is, you know, with the Voting Rights Act being gutted by the United States Supreme Court, it's easier now to do these kinds of things than it ever was before. There used to be an article, Section 5 of the Voting Rights Act, required pre-clearance of anything that was going to suppress or depress the minority vote. and states had to actually apply to the Justice Department to change their laws. They don't have to do that anymore. And so now what you're seeing is this is moving throughout the South, but it's also moving into states like Wisconsin and other places where there are Republican governors who now see an opportunity to depress the vote among minorities, among young people, and among those who are most likely to vote Democratic.
What's Karl Rove's GPS Crossroads GPS? That's a 501c4. How is that different than any other PAC? Steve?
Well, I mean, it's different. First of all, it's different from a PAC because it can take unlimited amounts of money, and a PAC can only take $5,000 and give $5,000 contributions.
And it's also anonymous.
And it's anonymous, so people can run money through there in any amount, and what you get on the campaign finance disclosure is actually you get nothing, and what you get in the tax disclosure, which is what you were referring to earlier, is anonymous donor, person, $18 million. Well, you know, Democrats actually have some persons like that. There just aren't as many persons like that in the Democratic Party giving money. And when they do, there are guys like George Soros who's not afraid to say he's going to provide money for the media fund or some other thing. He, in fact, says, I'm putting it in. So that's what everybody ought to do.
You know what? In the old days, Judith, before you were born, the old commies out in the rest of the world, and some here in this country, the few that were here, all said this country's run by the millionaires. It's all, it pretends to be a democracy. This crowd wants it to be as bad as the commies said we were, which is really an awful indictment about the worst one I can wage right now. They want it to be a country not run by voters, but run by millionaires. Anyway, thank you, Judith Brown Dianis and Steve McMahon, and we'll be right back.